Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon and adab. I'm your host for today's webinar on accelerating Pakistan's economic growth through skilled labor force and promoting vocational skills in Pakistan. I'm your host Sonia Umair from GSZ Pakistan TVET Sector Support Programme, and with me I have my distinguished panel members. Let's have their introduction first. We have Ms. Sabina Ahmed with me. She's a labor market, TVET and gender expert. Her work in development of strategies, different policies is remarkable.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you here. We have Dr. Zafar Moeen with us. He is labor market expert, economist and ex-vice chancellor of University of Punjab. Thank you for being with us, sir.
You're welcome, and thank you very much for inviting us.
We have Ms. Iris Cordelia Rotzol. She is head of TVET Sector Support Programme, and she has been working in development sector, in education and development sector for more than 3 decades. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Right. Before we start, we must know that why we are here, what are the topics which we are going to discuss today, and what are the key discussion areas we are going to know more on TVET, labor market and economics of the country. Technical and vocational education sector and vocational skills and training. What is this? What is this all about? It's merely not just a keyword or a word that just be there for the purpose of learning skills and all, but it's actually a skill set that more people want to know and more people should be learning to contribute into the economy of the country. The labor market actually is developed on the basis of the human resource of any country. It's basically the base of any country to build upon and contribute more to the economy. The TVET Sector Support Programme since 2011 has been working with National Vocational Technical Training Commission and has been working on TVET reforms in Pakistan. TVET Sector Support Programme has been contributing a lot into the TVET sector. In 2015, our contribution was to introduce, to launch the National Vocational Qualification Framework. With this, competency-based training was introduced into the country, and with the competency-based training introduction, that's where the private sector comes in. Now, most of the private sector always says that on the policy level, engagement of private sector is not there. When we want to involve more private sector for the practical skills learning and quality delivery of the training, that's where the private sector mostly mentioned that where is our role being acknowledged at the policy level. And this also then leads to somehow having this gap that the upcoming skills demand is mostly, it goes uncalled for or unknowing for. So our discussion will be prevailing around these areas, and today we will be learning from our panel members and experts that what can be done more to promote more future skills learning, TVET skills and involvement of private sector. But before that, my team has produced an information package for you. Let's have a look at that first.
Pakistan is rich in human resource. This human resource has been underutilized. One of the major reasons of this depletion is lack of hands-on skills. Conventional education system did not have the capacity to pass on industry-demanded skills to their graduates. The local industry needed competency-based skill force so they could instantly employ them in respective industries. This landscape changed with the one decision of revolutionizing the existing TVET delivery model with the launch of TVET Sector Support Programme in 2011. TVET Sector Support Programme revolutionized the TVET delivery model of Pakistan by launching National Vocational Qualification Framework, competency-based trainings, uplifting the training facilities, enhancing the capacities of teachers, engagement of private sector in curriculum design, on-the-job trainings, and final assessment of the trainees as per industry standards. This intervention is being funded by the Government of Germany, Royal Norwegian Embassy, and European Union in Pakistan. TVET Sector Support Programme being implemented by GIZ in collaboration with NAVTTC is now the flag bearer of Skilled Pakistan under the slogan of Skills for All. Pakistan's youth, which is undoubtedly the goldmine of economy, is now equipped with modern, competency-based skills aligned with practical needs of fast-paced industry, both nationally and internationally.
Right, Ji. Welcome back and thank you for watching us. Now we will move to our technical discussion. My first question will be to Ms. Sabina Ahmed. Ms. Sabina, our audience would like to know about your views that what are the dependent and independent employment opportunities for TVET graduates in Pakistan and how it can play its role in the labor market and economy of the country.
Thank you, Sonia. As you have mentioned earlier, a robust TVET system can be a key driver to the economy. It can be a great contributor to the economy and also lead to employment generation, both when we speak about the waged employment sector and also the own account work or the independent employment sector. But before going on to explore those opportunities, maybe it's worthwhile to also look at some of the limiting factors which have not yet sort of help us transition this whole cohort into employment outcomes. The key problem is the quality and the relevance of the TVET. I mean, in order to strengthen TVET sector contribution to the economy, we go back to what we are producing as skill sets. And what we are producing as skill sets is dependent on how relevant those skills are to the market. If we are not producing the skills that are required in the market, they are not based on market intelligence, they are not based on employer needs, then whatever we are creating is either redundant or irrelevant. So the first key thing is to actually focus on making sure that we are developing training programs which are relevant to the market needs. The other thing is the quality of the trainings themselves. You mentioned very rightly in the beginning, this whole shift to the competency-based training is one great contributor to that. If you have the employers or the industry's input into your program design, it translates into quality and raising the quality of those programs. So if we have these two things intact, we have a greater chance of making sure that whatever our young people are learning in those TVET institutions, it translates into proper employment outcomes and it helps them transit into the market itself. As far as the own account or independent employment is concerned, the biggest challenge is actually the challenges are at different levels. So there are individual challenges, lack of skill sets, entrepreneurship skills development. It's something we don't do as part of our trainings. It's something that is like an add-on sometimes. So the key thing here is to make sure that people have the skills to set up enterprise if they decide to do that. The other thing is access to the market, access to credit, access to business development services, because that is again a limiting factor, especially when it comes to women. Access to market is even more limited. Access to information where they can get credit is even more limited. So all these factors, if we kind of put them into place, we have greater chances of making sure that young men and women who enroll in TVET institutions or who are part of sort of the TVET system, they learn things which help them earn. So the transition from learning to earning can only happen if we have these key pillars like relevance and quality in place.
Thank you so very much. My question to Dr. Zafar would be that in your view, having TVET combined with the HRD policy of the country, you were also author of first national employment policy, and we have been working on different versions of HRD policy as well, and for some reason still in process of being getting its way into the cabinet. But do you think that national employment policy or the HRD policy and vis-a-vis having TVET aligned with that is really significant for the country, or there should be some more means and ways to that?
Thank you, Sonia. In labor market, we have two sides. One is the demand side and another is the supply side. So demand side is being determined by the labor policy or the employment policy, where we identify different industries where the potential of employment is high. And HRD policy is also sort of looking at those skills which are required by those industries. So there is a big correlation between these two policies. We cannot make them in isolation and then later on like we can say that there is mismatch. So to have this match of skills, we have to be like creating this sort of synergy between the employment side and plus the supply side. Now, the TVET is playing very important role in labor market, and in like 2004 or 5, I carried out 2 research studies where I included this TVET in determining the wages of employees, and I found a significant relationship between that. But if we look at right now at the skill level, there are a lot of problems. Our dropout rate for primary and secondary is like 44 and 40%. Less funding is available. Less institutions are there to create these like skilled labor force. In universities, we don't have like these departments which can really promote this training. So there is a need to have this like correlation between employment policy and HRD, and then the government should take the lead role in allocating those resources which are required for the purpose of creating that supply side. So I think coming back to your question, it is really a nexus. If we look at the labor market, then we have to look at the employment policy as well as HRD policy to have the match between skills which are required.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ms. Iris Cordelia-Rothsol, you have been working in international market for the development and vocational education and education as well. We really want to know from your experience that, you know, looking at the Pakistani market, the labor market, the vocational education sector, how do you see the upcoming market for vocational skills? What do you think that are the upcoming skills and upcoming skill strength scenario in Pakistan which the policy makers and vocational education responsible should be focusing upon to bring in more advantageous market, learning market for the students and youth?
Thank you very much. As the title of the webinar says it, modern economy needs a skilled labor force. That is very clear, and we need productive employment opportunities for the youth and for the people in the labor market. I think right now the challenge is to catch up the time that we lost during COVID. And if we look at ILO estimates, they say that about twice as many jobs were lost amongst wage and salary earners as compared to self-employment, even though self-employment was like also a refuge for many people to make some money during the crisis. But generally self-employment is linked with lower productivity levels. So the crisis really did not affect everybody in the same way. And at the same time, we also had a strong increase in the working age population. We had returnees coming back from the Gulf Cooperation countries. So right now we really need more, and we need better training opportunities, and we need them not only for the best of the best, but we need them for all. And this is why this government program, Skills for All, is really so important. There is a lot of potential for the integration of women in the labor market. There is potential for increasing efficiency in agriculture. And we also should not forget that COVID affected especially young people at a time that was very critical in the times of their life. This transition from learning to work, which is really a very important time for every young person, that was lost to COVID, and we have to also see how we can recuperate that time lost there. In TVET SSP, we just finished organizing a number of Rozgar Melas. We had it in Karachi, in Quetta, Lahore, Faisalabad. And that was very promising to see very, very motivated young people that used this opportunity organized by TVET Sector Support Programme together with NAVTTC, the TEVTAs and PVTC, training centers and the private sector. And we had so many young people really talking to the employers and test out their skills and how do they find their place in the job market. And they also had, at the same time, we had skills shows where they could display the skills that they've learned in all the training. And that was really very, very positive to see. Because after all, we should not forget that the youth that we are training now, that are now doing the transition into the labor market, is the same youth that will have to solve all the pressing questions in the future. So we really should invest in the youth.
Absolutely. I was one of the witness of one of these Rozgar Melas, and participation of the private sector for recruitment of skilled graduates was very promising, as Ms. Iris said. Ms. Sabina, you mentioned about quality TVET delivery, and my next question is in that regard, that when we talk about the quality TVET delivery, that also connects to the relevance. So how do you see private sector, the enterprises, the business and industry associations actually they can support learning more skills, bringing more quality to vocational sector, and then how it can lead to the contribution to labor market and then eventually economy of the country?
Mm-hmm. So the private sector has a very critical role to play. They are a very important part of the entire TVET ecosystem, as Dr. Saab earlier mentioned, there is a demand side to the TVET and there is a supply side to the TVET. Interestingly, the private sector is on both sides, so their contribution can be enhanced on both sides. On the supply side, for example, when we talk about relevance and quality, their input is critical into the design of the program. So one of the entry points for a private sector is actually to be part of the design and content of training programs. What skills are needed in the market? They can advise best in terms of skill matches and skill sets required. So their input in terms of what is required, what competencies are required, how do you design programs according to them. Again, CBT, as we mentioned earlier, plays a very critical role in there. It brings that input into the design itself. That's one approach to do that. So all measures which sort of strengthen the private sector's role into the design side of TVET. The other part which the private sector can be leveraged for is for the cooperative trainings. So they sort of invite and open their doors to the TVET graduates in a sort of collaboration with training service providers to provide for on-job trainings and sort of strengthening the whole concept of a cooperative training. So that's the second thing they can do. The third thing I think is actually engaging with the private sector to bring about a mindset change. Employers overcoming their trust deficit, for example, for initiatives doing in sort of joint initiatives with the government, opening their doors to public sector TVET graduates and particularly women. In many research studies actually point out to the fact that one of the key barriers to women in the job market is not anything else but an attitude problem from the employers. They think that women are either not qualified enough or not fit enough to be in a certain sector. So sensitizing them in terms of opening their sort of doors to be more diverse, to be more inclusive in their employment practices. I think these are some of the ways one could engage the private sector and make them a stakeholder, a real stakeholder into this whole ecosystem, and not somebody that we will tap on only when we need. So they have a continuous role to play that way.
Dr. Zafar, I'm just taking benefit of your complete experience with government sector. Ms. Sabina mentioned that private sector opening their doors to the vocational education graduates and even the people who are still on the job training. Private sector always mentions that there is a lack of policy inclusion from the government side that gives more leverage to private sector. If they are ready to play their part, maybe government should also give them a little bit of leverage, some advantages, some benefits, some subsidies or something. do you foresee, do you envision this this whole policy level inclusion for private sector and their acknowledgement at some point in time in the labor policy or into the TVET policy or HRD policy?
Ms. Sonia, if we look at the current situation, government of Pakistan is putting a lot of emphasis on private sector. Like Ms. Sabina mentioned about some of the factors, attitudinal factors, for like inclusion of women in it. We do have certain policies and institutions which are now trying to educate women and trying to change the attitude of employer as well as employees, which are women. Private sector has always been at the forefront, and I know when I was working on this employment policy and HRD policy, we went to different places and we have seen where government has invested a lot of money on these TVET institutes, and they handed over these to the private sector to run, plus some of the funding was coming from. But as we already know, you already mentioned that inadequate infrastructure is there because of less funding, and government of Pakistan has different priorities. This TVET sector or the skill sector is very important for the productive employment, but it needs funding, and the government of Pakistan unfortunately don't have that much funding. Therefore, if you look at the development programs, there is always now we look at a declining trend in the allocations. So once the funding will be there, I hope that the government will allocate those fundings and then bring more private sector players into this like supply side. And I hope that in near future, if you continue with this program which GIZ has started, I see a lot of like hope in future that things will change drastically.
Inshallah, inshallah. My next question, Ms. Iris, to you, taking further to what Dr. Zafar said, I still see this there's a missing link of realization of this fact that the government sector itself and the audience of the vocational education sector, they expect a lot from private sector, and of course the benefits goes to the private sector when the skilled human resource is developed and it goes into the market. You believe that there should be some relaxation of taxes or some subsidies, or how it works in the developed world? The government also take care of the sector which is contributing more to the social development. Do you see that this is an area which should be more worked upon at the policy level, or there should be more thought process to be putting into this whole thing?
Maybe I can talk a little bit about the situation in Germany, where it is very clear, especially the TVET training is a joint commitment. It's a joint commitment of the government together with the private sector, because both sides are really needed. The government with public training institutions, they know how to organize training, how to deliver training, the theoretical part, but without the practical part from the industry, the training would not be complete. So it's really both partners working together, and also in the commitment also means funding the education, because TVET is one of the most expensive ways of learning a job, and this needs to be shared by different partners. And there are calculations of how many how much it costs to train a mechanic, how much it costs to train somebody in beauty and somebody in stitching. Of course, these are different prices, and the studies also show that the money invested really will come back, because if you are invest in having a very high quality training, later on the worker, the person will also have very good jobs, will pay taxes in the industry. So it's really a win-win situation for everybody involved.
I may add a little bit on that.
Sure.
She really raised very important point, because once government will invest there, the ultimate outcome is economic development, employment opportunities, and increase in the overall economic growth. So if the funding is allocated, plus some relaxations are given in tax or some subsidies are given, everybody will benefit, not only the private sector but the government sector end of the day, because if there is unemployment, there will be a lot of problems, law and order situation and those things, plus poverty will be there because income level will go down. So it is really very important that government should take positive step to increase funding there and create this sort of environment where the employment opportunities can be created with these fundings, and economic growth could be achieved.
Very rightly said. Ms. Sabina, how do you think TVET can actually be a reason of pride and proud for the parents, for the families? And you mentioned about gender aspects, you mentioned about opening ways and means and doors. We always have this feeling, a little bit of taboo related to vocational education sector. Not every parent is mentally prepared to let their child learn vocational skills. Rather, they want their children to be a babu. So, how it's, what do you think, how it's affecting our labor market? A lot of skilled people or a possible potential skilled people are just sitting back at their home, not contributing to the economy, not doing anything. Do you think this is one of the major reasons why the contribution of TVET is less towards labor market?
Sonia, you have pointed out to a very, very relevant and probably one of the biggest challenges to TVET in Pakistan. It suffers from a poor brand equity. It is seen as a backup choice from the demand side. People who think they cannot proceed, so the first choice is always a general or mainstream education, and if things don't work out there, you don't get an admission, or you are a dropout, you're not doing great, that is when you choose TVET. It is not seen as a pathway of education which is chosen because it is worth choosing, right? The other problem, as we have discussed earlier, is it's completely missing from the policy discourse. We have very low investment from the government. You don't generally, till now, I mean now with all that's been happening in the last few years, at least one of the things that has happened is it's pushed TVET into the spotlight. It has pushed it into the main policy discourse, but obviously it will take a long time before the impact we'll see. So it's missing there. It's very invested in I mean low levels of investment generally in the TVET, and then this whole perception that this is not good enough as a first choice. I think that needs to change completely for us to be able to sort of reap the benefit or full potential of it. The transformational impact of TVET on graduates who acquire this training and transit into the market is exponential, especially for women. What we need to do is emphasize that, propagate it, publicize it. We need role models, we need cause champions who are sort of beneficiaries of this system, and they talk about their experience and they inspire others. So that's one way of doing it. The other is actually making sure that we keep highlighting this at all policy levels. We bring TVET to be as important as mainstream education, linking the two things together. When we talk about education, nobody even mentions TVET as part of it, although TVET is very much part of education. And then making sure that we have this option and we offer it to school children if they want to choose between this stream or that stream. We don't offer it. It's a very standalone stream. And it's, as I said, it's a completely backup system. So, sort of linking it with the mainstream general education, making sure that we have those options available to people who want to choose this. And I think another very important thing we need to do, particularly from inclusion's point of view, is to please open up our training menu for women. We can't just keep teaching them stitching. Or so this has to go beyond that. If we want them to be part of all the upcoming economic sectors, where the employment opportunities are, then we also need to open up the training menu and make sure that we train women to be part of the construction industry, part of the IT industry, part of the service industry. I mean, we really have to look at it that way. That will also improve the image of the TVET.
Talking about the access of women to vocational education, we lately witnessed some stories from TVET Sector Support Programme, from Kamyab Jawan Programme, women doing photography, women doing videography, women opening up software houses, women going into the logistics industry after learning IT skills. Even talking about the stitching and embroidery and fashion designing, I met a lot of women who have together, after completion of their training, they have opened boutiques, and they are really doing really well and earning a handsome amount for their family. One thing, your point leads me to this question actually, that the infrastructure that we have into the vocational schools here in Pakistan, one aspect is of course of access, that how a child, a vocational trainee or a potential trainee can reach to that institute. But besides that, do you think the infrastructure that we have here, the health safety measures, the overall environment of the institute is conducive, be it for men or women in Pakistan, or you think that needs to be pondered upon, looked upon more, and there is a gap which should be filled, or further working is needed there?
Sonia, as we say in Urdu, to dukhti rakhe. The lack of infrastructure in TVET is a major challenge. The NAVTTC website says that we have a little over 3,000 institutes overall, combined private and public in Pakistan, which are doing TVET services. Look at the size of our youth cohort and then look at these 3,000 numbers. By the way, for the women, there are only about 1,000. So look at the magnitude of the problem in terms of inadequate infrastructure itself. Then when you go and see those institutes, they lack facilities. They don't have, as Iris pointed out, it's a very expensive undertaking. You have to have labs, you have to have workshops within those institutes where sort of graduates it's not just about classroom learning, it's a lot about practical too. So we don't usually have enough investment and resources to be able to offer that into our own institute. The distance, we call it the distance penalty for women. Every time you move a kilometer away from their homes, there is a dropout of almost 5 to 10%. So you keep moving away and you keep seeing that dropout. So this distance penalty is also one of the challenges that we have. So not only do we need more institutes, we need better equipped institutes, we need to have better trained instructors. I didn't go on to the instructors side yet, but we also have a complete dearth of sort of good quality instructors. They are not from the market. And we don't have sort of pre-service training programs for them. So whatever we have is very limited resource base, limited expertise, limited market expertise of those who are there. And they also have a lot of challenges. Access is also a big problem to instructors as well as to sort of students. So all this combined, it has a very negative implication on whatever quality that we are trying to sort of achieve from here. So yes, going back, major resource inject, not just in terms of money but also in terms of quality. This has to go side by side. And then again, the role of private sector, like where do they come in? Do they come in as service providers? Do they support in sort of setting up better institutes? Do they make the contributions there? Or do they become more responsible when they are looking at hiring those, offering their workplaces as cooperative workplaces? So, it's a triangle which we need to keep reinforcing, we need to keep talking about, we need to keep emphasizing how important it is for these pillars to be together.
Indeed, indeed. Ms. Iris, you were mentioning about your experiences from Germany, and you also mentioned that TVET is a very expensive education, absolutely. In Pakistan, more focus is still on conventional skills. When we talk about implementation and spread of competency-based training, there is still a lot to do, and there are a lot many institutes in Pakistan which are still fully to be converted into delivery of competency-based training only, and making the conventional skills completely, teaching conventional skills completely redundant. So in this environment, having saying this, how do you see the future skills can be adapted into Pakistan? Because that's something youth of Pakistan also wants to learn new things, new skills. They also think that we should be learning something new which the youth of other part of world is learning. So how the developed world is reacting to that, and how do you see this coming into Pakistan?
I think Pakistan has a very good base to be working on digital skills, and I'm very happy to also talk about here that we are currently preparing the new phase of TVET SSP, and together with our partners we are also looking at different very modern, very innovative sectors where we could help the government to invest and to train young people. So one topic is definitely digitalization, and that does not only refer to digital jobs, just like graphic designers or accountants that work with digital means. Today, some jobs are completely different from what they were 20 years ago. For example, if you look at logisticians now, they work completely with digital means, whereas before it was not the case, even a short time before. But digital means also has something to do with how we deliver TVET. For example, before it was said, no, TVET, you have to do hands-on training. But no, there's also a lot more that has been done in the last years. We have virtual reality labs. We have really very good content prepared for TVET learning and TVET teaching, and also using less materials because you can do it on a computer as if you're doing it on the workpiece yourself. We have a lot of information available. We have, for example, we have worked with NAVTTC on setting up very comprehensive databases that can help make more intelligent decisions on where TVET should be going. And we need this because the technology will be changing all the time, and if the time we have to adapt TVET according to the new technology will be shorter and shorter. So we really need all the information we can have. And also in the jobs in the industry is changing with the technology. Today a machinist, an industrial operator has a different job than ever before, and this person needs to understand the computer that is being used in the production process, what is being done by the computer, where is the person still required. So this responsiveness to technology is really, really very important. The global interdependence between different economies is also getting more and more. So we have seen that, for example, young people can do coding jobs for companies in Europe or somewhere else in this world. But it also means that the young people are competing with people from other countries, so that we really need to be better all the time. And Pakistan also has to be more competitive to be really the economy that still can be as linked as to international markets as we want it to be. Another very important area that we will be looking at in the next years will be green jobs. We had the COP26 in a few weeks ago that was talking about climate change, that was talking about environmental warming the climate. And this is also a very big challenge that we have to tackle to make production and to make consumption patterns more greener, or to make it greener, meaning to produce less wastage, to have new materials, for example, in construction, to have a different kind of resource use, to use less resources, to use less electricity, to use less chemicals, for example. And probably the producers for export will first fear this pressure, because the export markets have a lot higher rules and regulations for products to be exported. But also in Pakistan, we have problems with toxic air. We have a relatively low rate of recycling, and I think there we can really step up. And we are very excited to be able to be part, together with the Pakistani government, to change production patterns and to become environmentally more sustainable.
That's a wonderful news. Going back to the discussion about government's policy, Dr. Zafar, labor market information system, vertically and horizontally, do you think that is missing in Pakistan, and this is something that really needs some more quality input and quality development, and it can add benefit to overall labor market system and knowing more about it and then making decisions on the basis of it?
Yes, Sonia, this is really something very important which is missing in Pakistan. We used to have employment exchanges like 10, 15 years back. There people used to register themselves for employment, and then this information used to go to the employer, and there this skill matchment takes place. But then because government is short of funding, so they closed down that system, which was very, very like good labor market information system. Now, I think if we can revive that system, then the chances are that we might have this computer and all these things, a better labor market information system. I think the labor market information system plays very, very pivotal role in matching this skill. And here in Pakistan, we have informal systems. We do have that information which is coming from different channels, but it is not well organized, like formal way of getting that information. Employers usually, whenever they have some demand, they advertise and they get like people who could be trained and then given employment. The overall at national level or at provincial level or even at district level, we don't have that sort of system. So private sector can play a role, but if there is some infrastructure, if there is some like framework where we can put all these things together. At this particular time, like Iris and Ms. Sabina both highlighted very, very important issues. We really need that sort of system which can cater the need of private sector. Particularly, we can integrate a lot of those things which are missing there. And then government can use the policy tools to generate those sort of skills through putting these institutions in place. But again, it needs the priority of the government and then some implementation mechanism through which this system can be put in place. We tried in our employment policy, we highlighted this thing and we said that there is a need for this formal labor market information system. But the government is still reluctant to go and set up this thing. Labor market information is coming through labor force survey and some other surveys which are collecting information from the Pakistan, but that is not like which can be used for policy purposes. We need specific information of the skill requirements and the level of skill available so that we can make those policies which can create employment and this linkage between the skills requirement.
So when you say labor market information system, do you think that again private sector be one of the very important stakeholder, because often we see that sometimes the private sector is normally not really ready to share all the information related to available jobs. So we do have some sort of robust mechanism for the supply data, how many graduates, how many graduates in pipeline, what skills, what scale, but sometimes to do the matchmaking we normally do not have the numbers on the right hand side, how many jobs are there, because then of course that connects to different level of financial and taxation and all aspects. So do you think that's also a gap and some sort of policy formulation, some sort of intervention is required there, or I mean, I would also like to know Ms. Iris' opinion how it's working in the developed world, but first I would like to have your opinion on this, that is it a gap or it's just a created gap?
I think if I understood properly your question, you are basically saying that the information about jobs available and the people who are looking for these jobs, that sort of information is not available from the private sector.
Yes, from the employers actually.
Employer mostly are the
private sector, yes.
Because government sector's jobs are always advertised and we get all that information. Here you are very right, because private sector has its own issues and they really don't come forward. But now I think when government is stepping in, they are trying to make certain information available. I have first-hand information. I went to different places and I really found them very forward-looking, and they are coming up with those indicator information which are required. But again, if we are not going to overhaul or reform our system, we will keep on facing all these problems. And important thing is that government, like I really, the question which you raised and then Ms. Sabina and Ms. Iris responded to that, the problem is that there is a big gap between skill needed and available. And here I think the problem is with the parents' mind, that they don't want their children to be coming into TVET side. They want their children to be getting general education, because everybody wants their children to be having officers. So that sort of attitude from the parent side is creating a lot of hurdles. And here then private sector is facing this shortage as well. So informal sector is playing their role, and therefore if they can get this employment from the other informal channels, they are preferring those sort of things. So you are very right that here private sector should provide all those information, but there should be some push factor as well.
We'll quickly take Ms. Sabina's point on this question before we take input from Ms. Iris. Yes, Ms. Sabina.
So I just wanted to add that a few years ago, through the program support, NAVTTC set up a central repository for labor information. I think it's called the Skilling Pakistan. So they have the supply, as you mentioned, they do have the supply side data. They collect information from all the institutes in terms of graduates are available. The problem is with the demand side. So we don't get a lot on the demand side, which is the current need. But I think another thing which one would look at also in terms of making sure that we don't have just what is required today, but what is required in 10 years time or 5 years time in the future too. So the labor information system also has to have a forward-looking research part as well. So yes, noting down what are the current job opportunities, I think one could strengthen this system. I know that it's functioning well, at least there is some, for the first time probably we have at least the supply side data all collected from all 4 provinces, sort of at a national repository, but also, sort of informing it not through just the current requirements, but also futuristically, like what we need to do.
Ms. Iris, how it works in the developed part of world? I mean, how do you get the jobs data, jobs information? How do employers are so confident to share this sort of information?
Yeah, this is indeed a very important factor. I can give you an example in Germany. Germany's industry, one of the very major industries is car manufacturing. And now we have the switch over from the conventional cars to electric cars, and the skills are needed for the production are completely different. So that means the people that have worked before in car manufacturing, they will probably lose their jobs or they have to be retrained. So it has to be very clear how many people do we need retrained, in what do we need them retrained. So there needs to be a constant dialogue between the private sector, between research institutes, what is really needed in what technology, and of course training centers, how many people they can train in what kind of time, in what kind of technologies. So it really has to be a joint mechanism. There are some other points which are also very important if we are not only talking about switching technology in one industry, but it also, as part of this dialogue and constant dialogue, what is very important is that there is transparency. We have it in the development on curricula, in the assessment. Industry needs to be really there at the time when the training is happening in order to say we need this or we need to adjust it. And also it needs to be clear for hiring HR staff of companies. They need to know if we put in the job announcements, we need an electrician of level 2, this is really, we need a person of level 2 and not level 3. So this needs to go together and needs to be transparent. The other thing is that right now we're seeing that technology cycles are shorter and shorter. That means now we are training people in the training centers, and in Germany vocational training generally is 3 years, 3 years training. So that means at the moment a young person starts his or her training, we don't know exactly yet all the things he or she will need to know. So we need this flexibility inbuilt along the training plan, and also we need recycling of training. We need lifelong learning, because it is clear that a person who is in industry now needs to go back to training centers and also always needs to be updated in new technologies.
Right, right. We are almost heading to the end of our discussion, but before we run short of time, there are still 2 important questions which I really want to discuss with my panel members. Having said this, we spoke about upcoming skills, we spoke about digital skills, green skills, and we also spoke about the competency-based training, which is also already taking place in Pakistan. Ms. Iris, my question is to you that how do you see in future our national vocational qualification framework can get equivalent to the NVQFs in other parts of the country, at least with the region, within our regions at least, or when and how, what will be the leading way which can get us internationally accredited and our skills being recognized globally?
Yeah, actually, international accreditation is a topic that has always been coming up in our discussion with NAVTTC, with the TEVTAs, so it's a really very important aspect. International accreditation is basically intrinsically linked with a constant improvement mechanism of all the elements that make out vocational training, be it adapting training contents, we were talking about new technologies, adapting equipment that is available, how is the practical training really complementing the theoretical training. So it's a whole set that needs to come together. And if we're talking about international accreditation, that also has very much to do with the relevance of the target labor market. For example, if we want to improve Pakistani workers to go to Saudi Arabia, then ideally it should be Saudi assessors who assess the skills of the Pakistanis, whether it is in line with the requirements of the Saudi Arabian labor market, whether it corresponds with the standards and the needs of the market. So basically international accreditation is a process, a longer term process. It's not only a logo on a certificate, but it's really something, an improvement process for a certain period of time which needs to be revisited. Are we still at par with the qualifications needed in different markets? And do we still continue, or do we continue to get the international accreditation? So in this process, we are very happy to accompany our partners to really improve TVET in Pakistan.
Thank you so very much. My last question to Dr. Zafar before we go on a break. Pakistan Bureau of Statistics always publish PSLSM and HIES. For our viewers, it's Pakistan Social and Living Standards Measurement and Household Integrated Economic Survey. Do you think in Pakistani employment trends by GOP, TVET is really missing and it's more about the other skills, rather TVET skills?
Yes, in these surveys, this information is not there. But we have this labor force survey where they are capturing this information, and that is basically the survey which captures the labor market trend. So if you look at the most of the information which is available through these surveys, I think we can get this information, but as it was mentioned, the quality and quantity of that information, it is still questionable, and we don't have any mechanism. Coming to Ms. Iris, this accreditation, international accreditation and standardization question, I think this is very important, and we realized when we were writing this employment policy that although we are working on the quantity of skills and quantity of that TVET, but we are not looking at the quality. Quantity is there, but quality is not there. And that is the reason we are facing a lot of problems. I have the experience living in Middle East, and I've seen that our people are very low paid, particularly in Middle East construction jobs and all that. The main reason is that they don't have those skills which are required in that particular market. Informal sector is there, which doesn't care about the quality, and that is the reason we are facing a lot of problems there. While we are talking about Middle Eastern market, there are countries which are importing this skill development to their workers, and they are earning at least double the amount which Pakistani workers earn. So there is a need for this quality framework, and there is a need that this should be standardized, and there is a need that internationally we have to get this recognition so that our workers also get not only in overseas market but in Pakistani labor market as well. So this I just wanted to add here because we have some information about that. And now I think when I was working as a Vice Chancellor in Punjab University, we developed this skill development center over there, and now Government of Pakistan has established this skill university which is in Islamabad, and we were working on these community colleges where this skill along with general education was integrated. So I think now if we see this TEVTA and NAVTTC, the quality issue will be resolved, I hope, with the support of GSG and that project which you guys are doing.
So very short.
Sure.
To the labor force survey, it does have that information, but I think we certainly need better indicators there. We have bulk categories like blue collared and white collared. It doesn't tell you what exactly is out there. Also TVET is
general information.
Very general information. And then we have the institutional TVET, which is it's institutionalized, and we have a large informal TVET, which is the Ustad Shagird model. And the labor force survey obviously doesn't differentiate between any. So I think some work also on terms of the indicators, might be.
Right. Before we go on a break, because we have to go on a break, there are a lot of questions that we are receiving online, and we will come after a short break. And then we will have your final comments, final input, your expert opinion, and then we will then conclude the talk. Let's take a short break.
And serve us some coffee.
Thank you very much for the overwhelming response. We have some questions here, many comments. Thank you so much for that. The first question that we have from you is from our viewers is the TVET sector reformation started in 2011 in Pakistan. Almost being 10 years having into this reform process with a lot of funding, of course. The major question is about sustainability, how the government and donors are taking it further for the sustainability. I think this goes to Ms. Iris.
Yes.
Thank you very much for this question. Yes, reform processes in education sector, not only in Pakistan but in all countries, take quite a long time because they are really profound processes. And if I'm looking back at TVET Sector Support Programme since 2011, we really introduced very far-reaching changes. For example, the competency-based training and assessment system. We had to build institutions in order to respond to this challenge. We had the entire assessment system had to be set up. Cooperation between training center and private sector had to be set up, and we tested how does it work best. And in the meantime, thousands of young trainees have graduated, and they are now working in the industry or they are doing self-employment. So yes, of course, sustainability is a very important process, and it has a lot to do with capacity building, and it has a lot to do with setting up structures so that they work. And I'm quite proud to say that I think we have reformed the system to a way that even though some things still need to be adjusted, but we have solid institutions. We have a partner that has really well-trained staff. And I think we have come very far in a sustainable TVET system in Pakistan.
Absolutely, absolutely. Next question is, what is normally a normal transition period time in any developing country to shift from conventional system to a CBTA system? I think we have many examples, but I would like to hear from experts. Ms. Sabina.
So I wish there was a simpler answer. I think the timeline would be difficult to estimate. It is totally dependent on the investment you want to make in this transition. So if you really want to push CBT, how much are you willing to invest it into the system? That will determine the outcome. And secondly, I think it is dependent on how successful the CBT graduates are in getting those employment and sort of succeeding at workplaces, because that will set the pace for the demand. So I think it's basically driven primarily on how quickly we actually adjust it as a system and start seeing the impact.
Right, Dr. Safar.
I would just add that attitude also matters here, because we don't like change. So if really we want to have this change, we have to change our mindset as well. And then I think, but transition is always very difficult and it takes time. I can't say that it is Aladdin's lamp which we will rub and everything will be done. We already started this transition, and we have established a lot of, and this GIZ is working on this transition. But of course, it's a long process, and it is a continuous process, and it is going to take long time.
GIZ is absolutely working on the reforms process in TVET sector with its partner NAVTTC and the provincial TEVTAs and TVET bodies with the funding of European Union, German and Norwegian government. I would like to take final last comments from my experts, and then we will be closing down. Ms. Iris, we would like to hear your expert opinion finally.
I think in this discussion we have seen how important really is TVET for an economy like the Pakistani economy, and I think we are on a good way to transform it, to improve it, and we are very happy to play our part together with the Pakistani partners.
Dr. Safar.
I would say that yes, TVET is now taking its footsteps there, and now government of Pakistan is also showing some seriousness, and there is already skill strategy, national skills strategy, and there is a university, there are some other institutions. That means government is allocating funds for that, and I hope that this TVET sector will get more and more importance as the CPAC is coming in. So the opportunities will be there, and with those opportunities, I hope that this sector will grow.
Ms. Abina.
I think I'll emphasize the shared responsibility part of it. It is not just the government of Pakistan, it is going to be also the private sector, and it's also going to be the communities, the men and the women and the families who are eventually, the benefit. So it's a shared responsibility. Everyone kind of recognizes its role and its part and then plays it accordingly. That will benefit the entire ecosystem itself. So, and it's all dependent on each other. So I think that way, the more we understand the sort of the linkages between these different pillars, the more we realize the importance of their roles, the more we do enough to build that traction and linkage, I think that will benefit the TVET sector generally.
More relevance, more quality, more access, putting in more efforts into policy, more HRD effort, more employment policy effort, more labor market information efforts. This is a takeaway message from today's discussion. We will be coming back into the comments that you have shared. Thank you very much for watching us today. Allah Hafiz. Goodbye.